Union, we see the end of the Cold War, we see the emergence of a sort of hyper global capitalism, this like virulent expansion of neoliberal economies. We see the beginnings of the internet and digital culture. There was so much that was changing right then that it really felt to me at the time that we were moving into a new world. You know, remember also that there was the AIDS crisis. People were dying. There was no retroviral cocktail yet. It's like we were in the middle of a war. In the United States, we were literally in the middle of a war. It's like this is during the Gulf War, before the Iraq War, the Middle East War before that. So it felt like we were in a time of crisis. We were in a time of economic transformation. We were in a time of technological innovation. There was mass mobilizations of queer and feminist activism, and so like that was what I was trying to express in my work. I was trying to write in some ways a history of the present. That I was trying to document the world that I was living in San Francisco. And the kink, we didn't call it BDSM back then. It was, SM or kink, or it was queer sexuality or radical sexuality or outlaw sexuality. And I really thought of it in the way Foucault thought about, like he has this famous quote where he says there are places like, in New York and San Francisco that might be called laboratories of sexual experimentation. And he was thinking very specifically about gay clubs and, BDSM dungeons. And I very much took that to heart, that I found in the radical sexuality underground in San Francisco, not like a commodified buy your fetish kind of BDSM, but a very politically informed, radical, experimental way of being with other people. It's like I found in Dungeon Space a true laboratory for experimenting with different kinds of social relationality, experimenting with embodiment, with appearance. It's like I transitioned in the dungeon. It's just like that I found a way to be with others. It's like, oh yeah, this works, and that it was I can't remember, no, it wasn't in Los Angeles at night. It was in one of the essays called Dungeon Intimacies, where the way I thought of it at the time is that there was a way that I found a capacity to translate identification and desire and practice in a small experimental setting, like to extend those actions and desires and identifications beyond the space of the dungeon and into the wider world, that it really was an incubator space. Yeah. So yeah, that was the place that I wrote from. It was unapologetically queer, kinky, and trans. It's like it was related to it's like I don't have anything to lose. It's like I'm not going to be denied tenure because I said this, because like I'm not going to have that job. And it's just like I just didn't have a job. I didn't have a job for 15 years that I had no job that I did not create for myself. It's just like I sold myself in so many different ways because it's like that's what I needed to do to survive. And I wrote about it. And it eventually landed me a job in the academy because everything gets absorbed and appropriated. And so, but then it gives you a chance to work inside the academy if you work in the same way, So I've always felt that I'm always happy to lose a job because I know how to live and I can find a way to make my money and do what I need to do. So it's just like I feel like I don't have fear of losing a job because of what I say or think or act or do. So that was my big takeaway from my queer years in San Francisco in the 90s.
Also, I think it's so interesting how you mention in this first part, well, you the curation of Mackenzie work through your spectrality mentions how Transgender Nation precisely was somehow the first, if we can call it that way, trans collective embracing a specifically queer radical politics, which, like, being now in Barcelona, it's similar than the process that happened in 2006 with Guerrilla Trabolaca, when some trans activists broke up with their psychiatrists and with the medicalist commands in order to build like this coalition of, trans hacker warriors that wanted to abolish binaries. Which is funny because one of the members is here in the front row. But precisely, I wanted to talk about transness, which is also a key concept for both of us. Recently, actress and trans vocal Laverne Cox said against the executive orders of the Trump administration that we are somehow focusing on the wrong 1%. And she referred to billionaires. But I think we share a political intuition that transness is something that has a power, an expansive and emancipatory power, that can be useful for the 99% of the oppressed of this world. No pasa nada. Revolution won't happen if someone does not have like a ring phone, so that's totally fine. So I think you have, like, ever since the 90s, you have positioned a way to understand transness that is precisely universalist. Now we have other contributions that are really, really worthy. I can think of Marquise Bay, how they present cisness as a territory of confinement, of carceral confinement that restricts what we can all, the working class, everybody, however they identify, do and become. Quick note, their book is gonna be published by Cielo Santo soon. I hope soon, because it depends on some work of mine. Then also Emma Heaney, whose work has not been translated yet, who has published this wonderful collection called Feminism Against Cisness, and presents cisness as something that goes beyond trans-identified people and has more to do with a historically specific, racially specific way of imposing bourgeois dominion onto bodies. And regarding all this cornucopia of understandings of transness as something more enriching than just a liberal identity, as something that transcends individuality, I think we can understand it as a sort of political struggle against cisness and as a political project that can be that overaching somehow in all liberatory politics. You defined transness in Queering the Woman Question as everything that disrupts or denaturalizes normative genders. And you also warned us that, I'm gonna make up this translation right now, but something like ripping someone's gender or misaligning them or misgendering someone is a practice of domination, regulation, and social control that threatens you with social abjection, adhering trans stigma onto bodies and positions that defy the norm, not only transgendered bodies. And in the same way, one of the most repeated moral panics of the far right regarding trans youth and childhood, it is that of social contagion. Like, they insist that there is a plague that is turning your children into transgender, and one day you will have to cut their genitals off, as if it's not something that the doctors have been doing with intersex people all bourgeois history. But I think there is something interesting about this trans contagion metaphor, which is, if we think about materialist conditions of possibility, what enables us to become something, to practice freer ways of inhabiting our bodies, or of letting ourselves be, maybe we should embrace and reappropriate what the far right is telling us as a sort of dirty, powerful secret. Yeah, we have this power to infect the oppressed with a desire of something else, with a desire of otherwise, and that is totally fine. And maybe we should organize that capacity. So, having said all that, what I wanted to is just to talk about how you understand transness, and also how can we mobilize transness in this against the stigma mode.
Again, good questions. Provocations. One thing I thought of when you were talking about virality and infection, I don't know if it's been translated into Spanish yet, but the author Tori Peters, she wrote a novella a few years ago that's now been included in her new book that's coming out. It's called Infect Your Friends and Loved Ones. And it's a dystopian, near-future science fiction story where it's like this virus gets loose that changes the way people metabolize hormones, and everybody starts physically transitioning. So it's an interesting story. So you mentioned one of the essays in the When Monsters Speak collection, which is called Queering the Woman Question. And that was something I wrote for a conference on third wave feminism. It's kind of like I wrote it to order for the event. And I thought it was a one-off, but it's like it was anthologized in some, feminist women's studies, textbook. And so it's had some influence I never expected. But what I would say about that piece is, that was from like 2002 or 3, maybe. It feels very old to me now, and it feels very much like it came out of a queer framework, a queer, Anglophone in the 90s queer framework. And that part of my thinking back in the day was just like I was totally down for queer as that sense of anti-heteronormativity, I saw transness as a form of anti-heteronormativity, not necessarily in the sense of object choice or desire or like who you wanted to fuck or how you wanted to fuck, but that being trans, it complicated or problematized what the position from which one desires, what one desires as, not just who one desires. And so I very much saw trans as part of queer. And it was only sort of over time that I became very frustrated with what I would call the cis-centric bias of much of queer theory. That I would say in English, it's like queer is not a 5-letter word for homo. It's something more than that. And it was partly out of my sense of, not disavowal of queerness in any way, but it's just like there needs to be another framework that is specifically looking at the trans question, and so I put energy into that. how do I think about transness now? I like the fact that I like that you keep bringing up questions of universalism, because I do think of transness as something that is not a private property of transgender people. And the longer I sit with these questions, the more that I think about it, the deeper I feel like my understanding gets as I get older and have more life experience and learn and think more, is that to me it is much more closely connected to questions of racialization than it is to questions of like queer desire. And racialization in the sense of how we all live within, what I think of as the paradigm of biocentric, Eurocentric modernity, that there is a logic of the body that came out of the modern European world system that ultimately, I think, traces itself back to the ideologies necessary to support the chattel slave trade, in the Atlantic, that that vision of the body as is like that, that's where the wealth of empire comes from. It's land acquisition, extraction, enslavement, and that enslavement it depends at some level on the idea that there are capacities of your body, physical characteristics of your body that function to create, through coercive power, that it performs a semiotic operation on your flesh to persuade the world and to enforce it at the point of a gun or a knife, that physical characteristic binds you in place, that there's something permanent. But it's like, if you have this bodily type, this phenotype, or this heritage, it means that you are property, or it means that you are excluded from certain kinds of work, or that you are bound to certain kinds of work, that there's a belief about the body that is absolutely necessary to the reproduction of a colonialist, extractive, Eurocentric world order, right? And so if that is the world that we all live in which we are taught, and that there is a social reality to the fact that we are taught that our bodies are what I call skin prisons. It's like that our very carcerality, or our very carnality is carcerality, right? It's like, so when you recognize that we are all imprisoned in our own flesh, there's the cliche, they say, trans people say like, oh, I'm trapped in the wrong body, right? It's like the mistake in that phrase is to believe that the body is a trap. It's like the body is not a prison. It's like the body is a sensuous place of our connection to other people and to the world. And so transness, I think, is the movement away from the belief in the carcerality of our flesh towards a condition of freedom that is beyond that, And so to me, like, changing gender, it's like change your body, change your hair, change your voice, change whatever. It's like, that's just style. That's what you feel comfortable with. That's what you like. It's like, you like it this way, not that way. It's like, and it should just be fine. But transness is like the movement towards freedom across the carceral structures that biocentric modernity like wants to sink into our flesh, right? And so in that sense, transness is not the property of transgender people, but transgender people can say to others, it's kind of like, I figured this out for myself because I needed it to survive, but what I have to say is that this is a practice that we can all engage in. Like, we can all move towards freedom by unsettling those ideologies from our flesh. And that it's like, this whole idea about, biological reality. It's kind of like, well, biology is just what biology is. It just does what it does. It's like we're born into certain bodies, and, like, those are our biological bodies, but what those bodies mean, how they're socially positioned, it's like how they fit into socio-symbolic structures, how they fit into socioeconomic structures. It's like those are the acts of human beings. It's like we have built those systems collectively over time, and we can take action in the present that collectively starts to build a different future where our bodies mean otherwise. It's like it is not in denial of the flesh to say that your body can mean otherwise, you know. And I think that this is a place that, you know, from my trans, white, North American, Anglophone position, it's like I feel like I find allyship with people who are differently embodied than me and who have different histories than I do. It's like I think of like, oh, feminism to me, like some forms of feminism can be like saying like, oh, because you were born with a uterus, it doesn't mean you should be a baby making machine. You want to have a baby, great. But it's like there should be no compulsion, you know, coercion to that. And so like to say, yes, I know what my reproductive anatomy is, but I choose something else. My body is a place of agency. You know, it's just like I can say it means something than what, you know, patriarchy says it means. You know, the same with questions about race. It's like that it's not like I know what my phenotype is, but it's just like that doesn't mean I'm property. Right? And so it's like for me, it's like I see from my position things in the positions of others that I feel like I recognize a politics there, and that I want to be involved in the same struggle because I have the same stake. You know, I have different skin in the game, but it is the same game. So in that sense, yes, I do think of transness as something that we who are trans can say. It's like, no, it's like the reality of our flesh can actually mean otherwise. It's like, let's go. You know, it's like that is what I feel like we have to add to this broader struggle.
Totally. In such a way, I think there is like a really beautiful connection to make between transness as it's being mobilized right now critically, and this assertion by Ruthie Wilson Gilmore when she says that abolition is emancipation in rehearsal, and how we can connect it with a more coalitional perspective against the carcerality of racial capitalism. But going on, because I would be talking like for hours, we jump to your more canonical text, which is My Words to Victor Frankenstein Above the Village of Chamonix. I don't know if you are familiar with this text, but I may summarize a little bit of it. So, back at the 90s, one transphobic feminist called Mary Daly used to call trans people or transsexuals the Frankenstein phenomenon, precisely like mocking the physicality of trans surgery. And what Susan did back then was to write a beautiful, heart-taking monologue in which she rewrote a specific scene of the novel of Mary Shelley. It is the precise moment in which the creature, having learned the romantic philosophy and language, encounters their creator, and basically ask him, why have you created me? But of course, this is not an innocent question. If we go back to one of the most inspiring texts of this field of study, of Gothic and monstrous theory, Jeffrey Jeremy Cohen, in his 7th thesis on monstrosity, says that the monsters are difference made flesh. And because of that, we have to continuously ask ourselves, who creates the monsters and what for? What are the interests at stake? What secrets do they hide? Because from the very meaning and root of etymological root of the word, the monere, monster, it's something that demonstrates something that used to be hidden. So we have to be aware of what are the news uh, that this monster is bringing to the world. As Cohen says, they are the harbingers of category crisis. And I wanted to focus on this. I mean, of course, if you want, you can talk about this text, because in this monologue, she ends up saying, hear my words, and you may well find the seams and sutures in yourself. I remember when I was just 18 years old reading this passage, like completely transformed my life, my transition, my way of doing gender, my way of doing politics. And that's why it's also like a really joyous moment being here right now. But what I wanted to comment on is precisely that we live in a time of capitalist crisis, which is also a time in which monsters are being produced. The forces of capitalist dominion are continuously creating and reproducing new monstrosities. We see it with Islamophobia. We see it, of course, with the disposability of the lives of Palestinian people and comrades, and of course with trans and non-binary folks worldwide. So my question would be, what are the possibilities of a monstrous politics in such a scenario? Jolene Sigerovich, in her essay, Trans Gothic in Literature and Culture, begins by stating that the monsters of Gothic novels, as well as trans phenomena, haunt the project of European culture. Is there a specter around Europe, and how can we embrace it or have a comradely conversation with it? And which kind of solidarities does it ask us to engage with? Also, like as a closing sentence, I would like us to think that the history of the oppressed has shown us somehow that one of the first steps necessary for every project of social control and dominion is to get rid of dissident groups. That was made by the fascists of the 20th century, and that will be made by their heirs today. So, thinking about these monstrous anti-respectability politics, but also what is at stake if we don't embrace a monstrous politics. Yeah, all that. You can choose whatever you want.
While you were talking, I was trying to find that Mary Daly quote, and I could find it if I spent a little bit more time, but I don't want to spend a little bit more time. All right, so yeah, I'm happy to talk some about the Frankenstein essay. Well, I don't even know where to start. It's like, it was one of the first things that I ever published. And it, back to what I was saying earlier about feeling like I have nothing to lose. So just write whatever you're going to write, say what you're going to say. And I did find this like tremendous freedom in, I started out thinking I was going to write an essay from the standpoint of the monster about the text of Frankenstein. The backstory for where it came from. It's like I had recently transitioned. I had managed to find some really crappy job teaching, as a precarious contingent faculty instructor person at a second-rate university in the Bay Area teaching a U.S. history class, and I saw a flyer on a bulletin board that was advertising a conference in Southern California called The Shape of Rage. And it was a queer studies conference, and it was about mobilizing the affect of rage in your academic work. And I thought, and it said, we invite non-traditional, presentation formats. And I thought, that could be a thing. And as I was riding the bus home, I was like, yeah, I wonder if I could do something at that conference. It's like, what would I do? A non-traditional presentation format about the affect of queer rage. Well, no, it would be trans rage, whatever. And I don't know why it came to me, but it did. It'd be like, oh yeah, like there's that scene in the novel Frankenstein where the monster is talking back to Victor Frankenstein. Like, what if I just wrote this monologue about kind of being an enraged transsexual academic, talking back to everything that marginalizes and stigmatizes me. It's that's what I'm gonna do. And I sent in a prospectus and it was accepted, and then I had to write the thing. It was a strange, I will even just call it a birth experience, that I was partnered at the time. My long-term relationship had broken up. I was with somebody new. She wanted to get pregnant. She got pregnant by donor insemination. So here I am as broke ass, trans contingent, academic person doing politics and making art, and my partner was pregnant, having a baby. It's had a baby a few days before I was supposed to give this paper at a conference. It was the night before I was supposed to leave. It's oh my God. And I was staying up all night, trying to finish my conference paper, and something just broke open inside me. And it was where I learned to turn whatever you're actually experiencing into the work that you are making, and that I could not think about anything other than, it's my new partner just had a baby. Oh my God, what does this mean? And it's I have this monologue piece that I wrote about the monster. It's it's not a whole piece. It's I'm just gonna slam all of these things together. It's there's gonna be this monologue, and then I'm gonna have to write some queer theory stuff and cite Judith Butler and Eve Sedgwick, and then it's just baby, and then it's again, how does it relate to them being trans? It's I was in this moment of panic, and I feel my ego just went to the side, and this text came out. And it's oh, that's really cool. It was a really cool thing. It's and so I get a lot of credit for having written this foundational piece in transgender studies. I'm I don't really feel I wrote it. I feel it came through me. I mean, just quite literally, it just came through me. And it taught me so much about, there's a line in the essay that says something about the seams and sutures, and seeing the seams and sutures. I thought, oh yeah, that is so trans. It's just show your scars, right? It's show how the pieces get joined together. And, I learned something about writing. I actually learned something about filmmaking. Writing. That's because I was thinking as I was writing, it's oh, historians get trained to weave this coherent narrative across time, and you're not showing the sutures, you're connecting the dots and making it look natural somehow. And it's what you do in film, it's you're shooting something and then there's a cut and then there's another scene. It's that the cut, the suture is very much a part of the narrative in film. And it was writing this piece, and we're I think I need to make film sometime, right? And then later I did. So yeah, that's the backstory for where the piece came from. But some of the content in it, the idea of speaking from the position of the monsters, it was directly inspired in some ways by this Mary Daly, a section in her book, Gyne Ecology, the Meta-Ethics of Radical Feminism. And there was a section in there called something like Transsexualism and the Frankenstein Phenomenon. And, I read that. It's kind of okay, I need to speak back directly to this piece. And so much of Daly's work and her student Janice Raymond's work was about vilifying trans people for being unnatural. Like it was this whole sense of like, oh, technology is bad and it's against nature, and transsexuals are these like technologized, monstrous techno bodies, and they're against, natural personhood, and, yada, yada, yada. And so for me, I was like, I knew from my lived experience that transition was lively. It's like that is how I had a life, right? It's like, so obviously at some ontological level, like cosmologically, it's like the universe has a capacity for finding liveliness in a body like mine, and so I knew daily was wrong, right? And so I thought, well, let me write from that monstrous position. And I will say one of my favorite lines that came through me in that essay was to say, it was about countering abjection. That's like, as a trans person who is made monstrous because of the means of your embodiment, that you are denied human community, that you are thrown outside the status of the human. And for me, it was kind of like, and what, you think that's a bad thing? For me, it's like that sense of being abjected. It's like it gives you a connection to a wider circle of being than that which is contained in the merely human. It's like it is to be abjected from the human is to find communion with the more than human, and that it is not a less than. It's like, and so that sense, I say in the essay, it's just like, I find no shame. I find no shame in acknowledging my egalitarian relationship with non-human material being, And so like that, so what that gave me as a perspective was to say, it's like, oh, like, what you humans are so afraid of is like the loss of privilege in that status of being human, imagining yourself as more than, better than other life, and so to be put in that position, the position of that which has been made monstrous, has been abjected. It's like it has been invested with this tremendous affective power by the people who want to put you away. It's like you bear a tremendous power, right, that others have given to you. They have given you so much power in making you a monster. And what you need to do from that position is to speak that which they have abjected, and you undo them. Right? So it is like to come back from abjection with a transformative power that gives you an almost oracular space to speak from, right? And so that you should not shy away from embracing the power of your monstrosity. It's like it is not negative. Who said monster was a bad thing? Monster is a warning, monere from the Latin, to warn, to demonstrate, to show. That's what a monster does. What does the monster show you by what you have made monstrous? That's the function right there. There's a famous essay by Donna Haraway that was floating around in the back of my head too, I think, when I was writing, The Promises of Monsters. And that, I do think monsters have a tremendous set of promises that they bring, that they promise. A monster promises a different future, right? That there is some form, some norm that exists in the present, and something is monstrous only in relationship to an ideal or a norm or a standard or a type. The monster is the thing that breaks form, right? And so if we believe that there are structures in the present, if there are unjust powers in the present, if there is a carcerality at the heart of modernity, it's like, why would you not want to break form? So what kind of monster? For what reasons? It's like, but it's like, and like, there's another way that's like, that's just like modernist aesthetics, right? It's just like that constant like looking for new form, right? And so maybe the monster isn't quite as radical as we think it is sometime. But if we are truly, you're trying to like let us break the forms that have bound us to move towards some kind of future that we desire on the horizon. That to me is a monstrous or a teratological aesthetics or politics, and I just feel completely unabashedly committed to that. There is a line in one of these essays. Which one was it? Maybe it's even I wrote these so long ago, and I don't really just sit around and reread my old stuff all the time. But there is a place where I cite Derrida, where he says justice when it arrives. Justice is always a monstrous arrivant on the horizon, right? And so like when you hear justice calling, it's like you don't know what form it will take because it hasn't happened yet. You haven't answered the call yet, but there's always something that is threatening to undo the present. It's like, I just catch sight of the kafia here. It's like, what does justice in Palestine look like? It's like it will undo the modern world because it is like a very unique instantiation of the coloniality at the heart of modernity. And it's like, what would it mean for justice to happen there? It will undo the world order. It's like we don't know what justice looks like because we have not achieved it there, right? Maybe what I would do is just read that passage where I talk about seams and sutures and Frankenstein, and then we'll be done or not done. I don't know. All right. I don't know how much time we have. It's like I'm sitting here until they tell me it's over. So let's see. Let me find that. All right. All right, three paragraphs. So I've actually said much of this in my off-the-cuff remarks. Okay, I find no shame in acknowledging my egalitarian relationship with non-human material being. Everything emerges from the same matrix of possibility. Monster, derived from the Latin noun monstrum, divine portent, itself formed on the root of the verb monere, to warn. It came to refer to living things of anomalous shape or structure, or to fabulous creatures like the Sphinx, who were composed of strikingly incongruous parts, because the ancients considered the appearance of such beings to be a sign of some impending supernatural event. Monsters, like angels, function as messengers and heralds of the extraordinary. They serve to announce impending revelation, saying, in effect, pay attention. Something of profound importance is happening. Hearken unto me, fellow creatures. I who have dwelt in a form unmatched with my desire, I whose flesh has become an assemblage of incongruous anatomical parts, I who achieve the similitude of a natural body only through an unnatural process, I offer you this warning. The nature you bedevil me with is a lie. Do not trust it to protect you from what I represent, for it is a fabrication that cloaks the groundlessness of the privilege you seek to maintain for yourself at my expense. You are as constructed as I. The same anarchic womb has birthed us both. I call upon you to investigate your nature as I have been compelled to confront mine. I challenge you to risk abjection and flourish as well as have I. Heed my words, and you may well discover the seams and sutures in yourself.
It was.
Hey, I'll just say one quick thing. Just like, I wrote that almost 30 years ago. Actually, 30 years ago, I read it. And just this past January, I had a chance to go to Berlin because there was this thing called the Opera Lab Berlin. They did an original avant-garde, musical composition thing called A Guide to Self-Synthesis. They cast me as myself, where they incorporated that text into the libretto, and I performed it live with like full accompaniment. It was totally fun.
Oh, I was thinking that I have a small problem, or a not problem, because I really remembered from memory all the passage. We are arriving close to the collectivizing moment. I really think what you said is just so interesting. I also feel that monstrosity politics somehow compels us to we could call it socialism of the disposable. And I think that's super important in times of crisis. So now I wanted to engage with the Leninist question, what is to be done? And I wanted to do it by putting into dialogue one sentence of yours that really struck me with a novel that you may know. But in case you don't, I'm going to introduce it briefly. So one of the feminist science fiction classics of the 70s is called Woman on the Edge of Time, in which a Chicana working class woman has been trapped against her will in a psychiatric institution. And once there, she is able to do some time traveling to a utopian future in 2137. In her travels, she discovers the whole organization of a new life. Social reproduction has been radically redone. The care of children and of elders has been completely collectivized. Bodily autonomy has been achieved with unprecedented possibilities. But one day, when she travels to the future, she ends up in somewhere weird, which is a different future, a really dystopian one in which the commodification of life has traversed all its limits, in which this possibility is the norm through beings. It is then when she asks her time travel comrade called Luciente something like, but you do exist, right? Like, I have been coexisting with you, even fucking with you. And they answer something which is, to me, is as luminous as the final passage of my words. They say, we have to fight to become, to keep existing, to be the future that happens. It is precisely because Connie, the protagonist, has been aligned and listed in a war between two possible futures. But the magic of this book is that it is the actions against oppression in her present in the 70s, the ones that decide the course of the possible futures. That is, instead of offering us a finished utopia or even a processual utopia, what this novel gives us is the very conflict between possibilities. I really think that we have also different possible futures, and that future is a terrain of dispute, but it has to be contested through concrete experiences of a struggle against oppression right here and now. And I really loved how you expressed this thing about a struggle by saying that there are struggles that when they are won, they allow your body to live. And when they are lost, they make it die. I think that's a really interesting approach. Maybe we should think of revolutionary fight as the reproduction of all the possibilities that keep our bodies alive, our diverse bodies, like the whole incommensurable diversity of the working class and the oppressed of the world. Precisely because that struggle makes us imagine how things could be otherwise. I wanted to ask you what aspect or what specificities could have a program of radical transformation that is nourished by trans-liberationist learnings, even knowing that it will have to be made collectively, and what we can envision here is necessarily limited. So yeah, like...
What is to be done? Right, yeah. Hi. Just a couple of thoughts. One, I always liked Marge Piercy's Woman at the Edge of Time. It's like, and it turns out, she's like a gender-critical, transphobic, right. And so I think part of our work is not just to imagine the future that we want to live in, but in some ways it's also to reimagine our past and to find these moments of radical potential that did not live up to their potential, and to go back to those moments and to not say oh, Marge Piercy, piece of shit, blah, blah, blah. It's kind of no, that was a radical moment. It's I can be inspired by what happened there. And I don't have to dismiss that because she herself, as a person living in the world, could not fully embody the potential that her art expressed, right? Just I can still take inspiration from that. And so, I think we have to have a generous yet critical relationship to the failed utopianisms of the past. And I would say the same thing about Marxism. It's just it's anti-capitalist, yeah, and it's just Marxism, tremendous, political critical purchase. It's it's excellent diagnostics. It's but Adorno and many other people say it's then you have actually existing socialisms as state project that hasn't always worked out so well, right? And so but to not dismiss the revolution, right? It's just it's still where did a revolutionary ideology fail to actually be as revolutionary as it promised? It's and that's our work in the present to do that. These are living traditions, not sealed scripture from the past, right? So what is to be done? I will just say, as a person, it's just I know that collective action, sociality, relationship is the way that we have to go towards a new relationality. But that question of the monster is kind of I don't know what it's shaped like. I don't know what the Vanguard Party is. Just I don't know what the 10-point program is. Just I don't think we've actually found anything that actually works. And that doesn't mean that it's hopeless. It just means we have the capacity in the present to be creatively engaged with our present moment, to analyze our present, to draw on what we know from the past, and to work towards a future that we believe in and that we want to be in. But I don't think we know it in advance. It's the monstrous arrivant on the horizon that is beckoning us. It's we hear its thunder, it calls us, but we don't know its shape yet. And honestly, the text that I find really inspiring is or not even the text. I mean, there's a particular text, but the concept from, Felix Guattari, it's like what he calls the molecular revolution. It's like, it's not necessarily revolution. It's not like you're storming the Bastille or, it's the Winter Palace or, whatever. It's like, most of us, like, we don't get to have those world historical moments in our lives. But that we can actually hold ourselves accountable in the present to a radical ethos about how we relate to others and to the world and how we understand ourselves, and that there are so many opportunities for not moving at the macro scale or what, Guattari and Deleuze call the molar scale, but at the molecular scale. It's like if we think about it's like we are connected to everything around us and to each other in like manifold, myriad ways. And like every little thing we like or don't like, every little thing that we do, it's like it's either sort of like it reproduces the present or it's a possibility for disrupting and remaking the present. It's like all of those like tiny little gestures. Guattari, gives this analogy of the iceberg. It's like, most of the iceberg is submerged below the water, but it's like that ice is like interacting with the seawater, molecule by molecule. It's like it's happening all the time. It just looks like this mountain of ice floating in the ocean, but like there's something going on. And at some moment, it's like this like molecular process that has been happening. It means that the balance shifts and what is above the water line and below changes. It's like, and the iceberg flips over. And I think like that, it's like we don't necessarily have the chance to be involved in the macro revolution. It's like those are world historical moments that happen or they don't, you're there or you're not, but that we can live our daily lives practicing molecular revolution without a program, without a vanguard party. It's just like, what feels right. Where your own liberation lies. How, if you're being ethical with yourself, it's like how you're allied with the struggle of another. It's like it's those moments that are the moments of revolution in everyday life. I also think about Edouard Glissant, the Afro-Caribbean poet, in his book Poetics of Relation, where he says, sort of like I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember it exactly, but it's like the bare minimum ethical act is to be aware of the thought of the other. Right? It's like, oh yeah, it's like there are other people in the world and they're different from me and I should pay attention to that. And, right? He says, but what's really radical then is not the thought of the other, but the other of thought. It's like the other of thought is like what comes into you and transforms you because of your encounter with it. And so like to hold yourself open to the transformative potential of encountering the other of thought through how you relate to others. Like to me, like that is truly revolutionary. And it takes me back to another feminist utopia. I'm not sure if it's the 70s or 80s. It might be 80s, but Octavia Butler's parable of the sower, where she invents this whole religion called Earthseed, but its mantra is like everything that you touch, you change. And everything that you change changes you. And so like to be engaged in that collective process of ongoing transformation at the molecular level that will, in faith and hope, culminate at some point on the horizon in the structural transformation that we all need for life to continue. It's like that's the political project, and it's monstrous. It's always a monstrous project.
To end up, I would like to finish with a more speculative question, but precisely because we know that the speculation is a materialist project, it has to do with departing from some fragments of the concrete and being able to fill the gaps in order to get a vivid image of a then and there of what could have been or what is to be which of course poses a radically critique on the present conditions of existence. I love a quote that, of course, I'm going to make up too, by John Greenaway, a Marxist, Gothic Marxist theorist, in his book Capitalism, A Horror Story, in which he says, the monster as a category can work as a medium to put into question the imaginative limitations of capital. A monstrous preface of what it is struggling to born. And of course, that leads us to another famous communist theoria dicta, which is the Gramscian magnum, the old world is dying, the new world struggles to be born, now is the time of monsters. When he wrote this passage, he referred to fascists as the monsters. And we wanted to suggest that why shouldn't we rewrite this sentence, and saying that now is the time of monsters is precisely that now there is a possibility of revolutionary upheaval, of unity of the diverse, that has to do precisely with all the disposable lives, which are also laboratories of radically different relations. So my question or my invitation is twofold. The first one is, like, if you close your eyes, what aspect has for you this then and there of monstrous utopian possibility? Like, what do you see? Or not see, maybe it's something beyond visibility. And finally, if you were to choose a fragment, a text of yours that could be used as a speech of proclamation of this revolutionary monstrous republic or confederacy, which would it be, and why don't you read it aloud for us? And we can have this as a utopian ending.
Okay. You know, I mean, I on the first part of your question, it's like, I don't know. Like, it's that question of, like, not having a program almost as a program. You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know. Just like, there is a way, just like, the thought that just came to mind, another quote, Samuel Delany, another science fiction writer, queer science fiction writer. He says the difference between queerness and fascism is that fascism says, I don't care how it feels as long as it looks good. And that queerness says, I don't care how it looks as long as it feels good, right? And so, like, I think there's something to that. It's just like, I don't know, like, what should we do as a confederacy of monsters fighting fascism? It's like, we should do what feels good. We should be with each other in ways that, you know, feel loving and exciting and, like, sexy and energizing, and just like that you find ways to be with others, and then you just do it, and you do it in the face of oppression. You know, that you refuse to you refuse to die before you're dead. You live, you organize, you build. You know, it's like, and you know, I do think that something will come out of it, or it won't. You know, but just like, but that we just have to be engaged in the process. So yeah, it's just like, if I had an answer, it's just like, I'd be Lenin, and just like, I'm not, and I don't. So it's just like, I'm just gonna do what I do and hope it does something that moves people in a way that is good for us and the more than human that we share this place we live on. Since you told me you were going to ask that question about, like, reading some piece that could be more manifesto-like, I think the perfect thing for me to read, I was thinking back to the last time that I was at CCCB, which I think was like in 2019 maybe, but one of those little brown books right here. I cobbled together a bunch of stuff that I was working on to like give as a talk here called The Transgender Lens. And there's actually a passage in there that piece opens with that I sort of said at the time. It's like, this is going into a book that I'm working on, and that book that I'm working on is like finally done. It's at the publisher. And the piece that opens this, it's like has been reworked as the end of the book that I have just submitted, which is called Changing Gender. And it's not like, I'm not changing my gender, talking about changing gender and sort of as a social system in the way that we've talked about it today. And so I thought it would be quite fitting to like end today's presentation here at CCCB with the final version of what I read and wrote the last time I was here. So just briefly to set it up, at the end of this book, I'm playing with words, and I'm playing with words about breath, and back to those Latin roots, spirare, to breathe. And was thinking about the relationship in English between the words, inspire, conspire, and transpire. So like different ways of breathing. And so if you're inspired by something, it's like you are literally like breathing in the spirit of something. You're inhaling it, you're taking it in, inspire. And to conspire means to breathe with, right? So you are breathing alongside something. You are in a chorus, breathing chorus with someone. You are conspiring. But transpire, to breathe across, right? And so like that idea of like, how is it that you like find liveliness, through breath in moving across difference, right? And so there's some wordplay in there, because transpire, as much as it means literally like to breathe across, it can also just mean to persist. It's like, as it transpired, like there was no volition. It was just something that happened. It's like as it happened, as it transpired. And it's like, to me, it's like that downplays the radical potential of like breathing across, right? Just like, it's like, that's lively, like that's breathing life into difference. So it's those ideas that I had just explored before I get to the final passage in the book, which is more manifesto-like, more molecular revolution-like. I realize as I've been talking today, it's like some of the things that I've said kind of come out of some of this writing. So here, as a final benediction for the presentation today, this is what transpires now. Are we not now broken open in some way, all of us, by the violence of our times? We are gathered at the crossroads, strangers with strangers, in a shared and trembling vulnerability that we can but pretend we do not feel. Are we not all hungry for some measure of grace? We who are embodied otherwise, when we manifest our wayward realness, can bring worlds along with us. We have learned for the sake of our own survival that deep transformation is possible. I am here to tell you that this is a power within us all. We can indeed enliven a new reality that surges forth from what has been to what yet shall be, and not what was or merely is. The transpiring of our lives is more than our mere baseline persistence in time. We can indeed breathe change into being across difference. Something is already shifting, something tectonic, climatic. The evidence is all around us, as certain as a sudden jolt that punctuates the slow grinding of the continents against themselves, as surely as new patterns of earth, air, fire, and water now rearrange themselves across the planet's warming surface. Gender, that vast leviathan, whispering the secret of our identities into our ears and placing us with our kind, is part and parcel of this change. The new configurations of personhood it sets a bubbling in the cultural stew are but the signs and symptoms of a deeper flux in the field of life. That vast leviathan, unshackled from its history, can offer new grammars for new namings and new actions in the world. History is not the past. It is the action of telling a story in the present. History is not a fact, it is a promise. The promise that the future will be as different from the current moment as the current moment has become from all the moments that have come before. History is not a chain that binds us to a permanent social order. It is a living witness that bears testimony to the inescapability of difference and the inevitability of change. It is more than piling one dead fact on top of another to fill the emptiness of time. It is more than constructing a monument to the violence of the great and powerful, more than the satisfaction of a craving among the people for the sweet comfort of nostalgia at the end of a bitter day. History is the act of conferring realness on the unremembered and the effaced, in anticipation of futures that we must yet summon forth from a present moment that demands our daily effort to shatter and transform it. It's time to make history by changing gender, to change the world. It's time to breathe, to rise, to reassemble, to transform. Come with me. It's never too late to live, however close to death we all well might be. It's not too late, but it is definitely time to go. Thank you.
Thank you for the generosity of sharing your work. Thank you also for also the generosity of the questions, the answers, and for creating a space where we can all breathe together. I think we now want to stop listening to ourselves a little bit and open it up to you. We have a lot of gorgeous minds and bodies in the audience. Remember that you can ask. We have a mic that Aina, it's here, yes. That Aina is going to be passing around. You can ask the questions in English, but also in Catalan or Spanish, and we can translate it. And also, we know that not everybody feels comfortable speaking up. So if you don't feel comfortable speaking in a room full of people, but you have a question, write it down, and we can read it for you. But also, we can leave some minutes at the end if you want to approach Ida or Susan and ask the question on one-to-one. So. Clara, there, yes. If you can use the mic, we can, this make sure that it's accessible for everyone, yeah.
I can hear you.
Yeah? Now? Yes. Well, thank you so much, all three of you. It's truly been an honor to be here in the same room and hear you speak. I have so many questions that I would ask. I'm going to just ask a very simple one. You've mentioned a lot of science fiction works and authors, and I am currently studying sci-fi. And so I would like to ask Susan, has science fiction as a genre, as literature, had an impact in in your theory, in your work? If there has been any, could you speak a bit on it? And just as curiosity, I would love to ask, what are some of your favorites?
Great questions. I mean, and I would just say, I think Frankenstein is like maybe the prototypical science fiction, modern science fiction novel. So it's just like, yes, very influential. I can also say that as a young teenager, remember I'm in my mid-60s now, so my mid-teenager years were half a century ago. But my 8th grade, like what was I, 13, 14, somewhere in there, my language arts teacher in school introduced me to Kurt Vonnegut. And Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five, just like some people think very middle brow, whatever it's like, but I still think it's a brilliant novel about PTSD and war and trauma. But it's like what was important for me when I read that, 2 things. It's like in seeing that sort of literary representation of the sort of dissociation, becoming unstuck in time, that as a result of trauma. It's like that sense, it's like to me there was, even though it wasn't about quote unquote gender dysphoria, it's like there was something that I recognized in that text. I'm going, oh God, like that, just like I so identify with this. And it has a, very science fiction-y element because the protagonist, Billy Pilgrim, it's like has been transported in one of his time streams to another planet by extraterrestrial aliens, the Tralfamadorians, who have 5 sexes, right? And so it's kind of like, it's like that was one of the first places that I encountered in literature, the relationship between sex, gender difference, new possibilities of embodiment, and some kind of alternative future that was somehow connected to these feelings I was having about gender dysphoria, because I knew really early on in my life I was trans. It was just a question of figuring out what to do about it. So yes, I would say science fiction has always been an important touchstone for me, and that the kinds of science fiction that I like best are the ones that more than like fantasy or, like Tolkien and, sort of that style of, fantasy, fake medievalism, or werewolves and vampires and whatever. It's just like, I like the science fiction that is kind of like, the present is very discernible in it. Maybe it's very near future, or it's working on a problem that it's like very much a problem that comes out of contemporary social existence. Kind of the new science fiction of the 60s, sort of that second wave, post classic, mid 20th century science fiction. So yeah, I've always like that. I don't read it as much as I used to. I mean, there's so much more out there, but it's like I read really extensively in the 70s, 80s, into the 90s, and I still love it. So yeah.
May I add something? Yeah, like profiting from your question, because we were commenting before about a novel that was like recently published by 2 queer or women called Everything for Everyone, which it is gonna be published in Catalan really soon, hopefully sooner or later in Spanish too. This novel, which is somehow oral stories of the participants of a revolutionary upheaval and also the life that came after, with Manifest, the Catalan version. It's so interesting regarding what Susan just said, because precisely you can really feel how all the future relationships are connected to specific struggles of the present. Like, be they queer social reproductive practices, be they educators strike, healthcare struggles, even you can see how the future networks of care are a mix of everything, of indigenous land, territory struggles, together with rape, trans healthcare through drug use, and along with feminist clandestine abortions. And I think this is just like a wonderful attempt to connect the premises now in existence, as Marx would say, with these images of worlds to come. So yeah, it can also be read in English, Everything for Everyone.
An Oral History of the New York Commune 2052 to 2077
Exactly.
by M.E. O'Brien, who is both a trans-Marxist and psychoanalytically trained. Ooh.
An archivist.
And an archivist, right, yeah. Yeah, and just quickly before another question, one of my favorite little historical tidbits, there was a science fiction imprint in the U.S. called DAW, D-A-W, that published a lot of the new science fiction. It was the imprint of somebody whose name was Donald A. Wollheim, D-A-W, DAW, science fiction, but that Wollheim had started out as an editor with Hugo Gernsback and was in the pulps, and but it's like he was the one who sort of broke a lot of like Ursula K. Le Guin and some of the new science fiction of the 60s. It turns out Wollheim was a quote unquote cross-dresser, and that he was very involved in this retreat in upstate New York called Casa Susana, which was a closeted enclave for heterosexual married men who wanted to dress up on the weekends, right? And I don't say that disparagingly. It's just but that they were, they lived a bi-gendered life. And so I have found it quite fascinating that one of the major publishers of the new science fiction is a dedicated, avowed, lifelong cross-dresser. So.
I know that we have another question over there. Yeah.
Yes. Hello. Yes. Thank you, Susan, Iran, and Elisabet, for the wonderful conference. I wanted to ask you, Susan, about this idea that you mentioned that to be honest, it completely blew my mind, that you mentioned how transness is closer to racialization instead of queerness, and this idea of how, because it is connected with the discipline of the body and so on. And I guess I wanted to ask you if you think this is key to understanding why we are witnessing a moment of such intense transphobia nowadays, and we are witnessing how trans people are being scapegoated in a way that is being even among the queer community, and especially within the queer community and white-dominated spaces, and specifically cis men white-dominated spaces. If you think this is connected to that, or if we can maybe explain this sudden wake of transphobia, which is of course not new, but it seems to be more visible or more radical than before, if you think that we can make a connection with this idea.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, because I do think, for however much, we say LGBTQIA ... plus, it's they're very different communities, and there is a way that transness does not fit with the sexual orientation categories. That one of the essays in the book is, kind of saying it's LGB and everything else are assumed to be cisgender, and that it's trans that holds the space of, all of this difference that is excluded from the presumed cisgenderness of all of the other categories. And so, I'm not a theorist of cisgender, but it's I run a book series that's publishing a lot of the new work in that area. I'm really excited to see it coming out. But it's I think of cisness the way Emma Haney writes about it in Feminism Against Cisness, or the way Marquise Bay writes about it in System Failure, is that cisness is the place of like unexamined biocentrism. It's like it's the place that wants to hold on to the ideology that I think is at the heart of Eurocentric modernity, a certain belief in like the skin prison of the body. And so that people who have not refused that privilege, if they have the chance to occupy it, it's like it forms a basis for everything from like progressive to, fascist, from radical to fascist. It's like in the holding on to that privilege. And so for me, it's like there is a tremendous split between the idea of transness as a liberatory practice akin to certain feminist and racial and indigenous like freedom struggles. It's just like to put transness on the side of that against the privilege of an assumed cisness. And so like it's just like I look at what's happening in the US right now. It's just like the US Secretary of the Treasury is like an openly gay man, and the Trump administration, Peter Thiel, like one of like the billionaire funders of everything, like openly gay man. Or like you look at, Alternative for Deutschland. It's just like the leader of AfD is like a lesbian with like a Sri Lankan wife. I mean, it's just like gayness, cis gayness does not challenge some of the structures of oppression that we live in the way that transness actually does. And so transness threatens to undo a foundational presupposition of the dominant way that power is organized right now, in a way that like gayness, I think cis gayness just doesn't. It's like it has been fully, incorporated. I think one of the things that's been interesting over the last, 30 plus years of, trans activism, and I would even say like liberal trans activism or activism aimed towards trans inclusion, has been predicated on that sense of like, oh, trans can be just the next neoliberal flavor of, identity, diversity, like whatever. And that part of what we're seeing right now is people going like, yeah, no, I'm going to call bullshit on that. No, no, and that trans is being abjected again in a way that's not just repeating the way that trans lives had been like ignored to the point of death, and subjected to structural violence without being cared for by a broader constituency. It is that and the direct targeting of trans lives as it's like it's taking that new minority status that was achieved through efforts at neoliberal inclusion, and the fascists have taken that and said, yeah, it's like now that you're minoritized, it's like that's exactly where we're going to turn the screw on you now, that we are going to crush you the way we crush other minorities. And I really do think that the anti-gender movement right now, it's like it fulfills many of the same ideological functions for contemporary versions of fascism and reaction that anti-Semitism filled for the early 20th century, mid-20th century fascism. It's the ideology that holds together disparate material interests that otherwise might not find common ground. It might be like today going like, oh, are you like pro-Ukraine or pro-Russian? Are you pro, Gaza? Are you pro-Zionism? It's like, are you, it's like there can be like many differences, but everybody can say like, yeah, but I know what a man and a woman is, right? Like I might not agree with that position, but yeah, it's like women should be safe in the toilets and boys shouldn't play in girls' sports, and it's like because it's that doubling down on the ideology of biology as the skin prison that binds you in place, and transness threatens to uproot that. So yeah, I just think I unfortunately I think so many forms of cis homosexuality have been like completely enfolded into the normative society. That doesn't mean that cis queer people can't be radical revolutionaries. It's just not necessarily on the basis of their homosexual desire. Even Mario Miele, towards a gay communism, it's like it was on the basis of the sense of transsexualita. Yeah.
I was gonna say that there is like